good people don't smoke marijuana.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show. The medical marijuana for you and me. Ah, yeah, the medical marijuana. Whoa, 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 ah, yeah, the medical. It's the medical marijuana show. You knew we know.
I want to talk to you.
Everybody, welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. This one is for Saturday, the 13th of January, 2018. I'm your host, Larry Love, and we're here every week to bring you the latest information on medical uses of cannabis and the recreational use of the plant, and this information comes from all over the globe. This week, I'm really happy to have Cannabis Cheri Sicard on, and she has a new book out. She has several books. This one is the Easy Cannabis Cookbook with more than 60 medical marijuana recipes for sweet and savory edibles. That's Cheri Sicard, and we'll be with her in the second part of the program. But first, as always, I've got news for you.
I've got news for you.
Well, the news is just a continuation of what's been going on last week with Jeff Sessions. And this is from thehuffingtonpost.com. Justice Department blindsided banking agency on the marijuana reversal. Critics say that the Justice Department's decision could drive banks out of the cannabis industry. This is by Sarah N. Lynch, Huffington Post, and Reuters. When the U.S. Justice Department said last week it was reversing policy on this $7 billion marijuana business, it failed to first notify federal officials who advise banks in states where the drug is legal, sources in Congress said. The announcement by U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, a longtime critic of legalizing marijuana, caused confusion among the banks about how to do business with marijuana growers, processors, and distributors without running afoul of the federal money laundering laws. The uncertainty unleashed a flood of phone calls to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, they're called FinCEN, an office within the U.S. Treasury Department, from congressional offices with questions from lawmakers and constituents. But FinCEN had no ready answers because it received no advance warning of Sessions' January 4th announcement rescinding the Obama-era policy that had eased up on federal enforcement of marijuana laws, said the congressional aides who spoke on condition of anonymity. Being anonymous. Anyway, the Justice Department spokesman declined to comment about whether it had coordinated with FinCEN in advance. The abrupt announcement by Sessions was the latest example of sudden actions by the Trump administration that have blindsided its own government agencies on major policy shifts. In 2017, the administration blindsided the Defense Department with a decision to ban transgender Americans from serving in the military. It also took many by surprise at the Department of Homeland Security by barring people from some predominantly Muslim countries from entering the United States. Marijuana is banned by federal law, but has become legal in one form or another in a number of states. Well, a number of states is like 30. About 400 banks and credit unions do business with the U.S. marijuana industry. Most are small institutions with operations limited to states where marijuana has been legalized. So we'll keep our eye on that. It's crucial, and that's one reason why we need this taken off of Schedule 1, because the banking industry is what's holding back business to be run properly. Sessions put the word out to the U.S. attorneys around the country. Oregon's U.S. attorney says he has significant concerns about the state's marijuana regs and enforcement. This is from the Cannabis.co by Polly Washburn. Billy J. Williams, the United States Attorney for the District of Oregon, said in an editorial published Friday that he has concerns about the state's marijuana regulatory structure and current enforcement practices. In an editorial published January 12th on OregonLive.com, Williams wrote, "I have significant concerns about the state's current regulatory framework and the resources allocated to policing marijuana in Oregon." Williams said that he has been given wide latitude from U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions to deploy department resources after Sessions' memo last week rescinding the Holder-era Justice Department Cole memo that restricted federal enforcement of federal marijuana laws in states that had legalized the sale of cannabis. U.S. attorneys in different regions have released statements regarding their approach. Massachusetts federal prosecutor said he cannot provide assurances for the legal marijuana businesses, while Maine's attorney had said marijuana users are not a priority. Williams, however, wrote it would be inappropriate. It would be inappropriate abdication of my duties to issue any blanket proclamations on our marijuana enforcement strategies in light of the federal law. Williams cited several issues with the black and gray market grows, saying they are the source of money laundering, violence, and environmental degradation. Wow. Anyway, that it's a wait and see is what that really is, and we're going to have to wait and see. So many people have made statements in regard to this. Governor Hickenlooper of Colorado was interviewed by NPR of Colorado just the other day, and this is what he feels about what's happening with Sessions and moving forward in his state.
Democrat John Hickenlooper is that state's governor, and he joins us now. Welcome to the program.
Glad to be on.
How will this change affect your state?
Well, it's hard to see right now. I expect that it's going to end up being more bark than bite. I mean, if you look at it, 30 states now, I mean, more than two-thirds of the American public, 30 states have legalized marijuana in some form. It's hard to imagine if states really are the laboratory of democracy, which I think they are. We're conducting one of the great, social experiments in recent history, and it's beginning to work. I still urge other governors to go slowly and let's see what the unintended consequences are. But it's the wrong time to pull the rug out from under the entire, national effort.
Well, just to get specific, how much tax revenue does the state of Colorado get now from legal marijuana sales?
Oh, we get a little over $200 million last year, but keep in mind we've got a $30 billion budget. Mm-hmm. And so of that $200 million, a bunch of it, probably a third is in terms of regulations and trying to do enforcements. We spend tens of millions of dollars making sure that minors don't, teenagers, kids don't get access to marijuana. So it's not about the money. And I don't think states should be in a position where they're making these decisions as a source of revenue.
Governor Hickenlooper also says states will have to weigh public health and safety concerns. And Hickenlooper says that's why the U.S. attorney in Colorado today said his office won't change its approach to marijuana cases.
Well, I think the U.S. attorney is looking at the guidelines that I think almost all the U.S. attorneys in the different states are working on, whereby they have limited resources and they are trying to prioritize serious, heroin, rampant opioid abuse. those kinds of things are much higher priorities to them than worrying about medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. So they've got their priorities, and I don't think their priorities have changed. Again, when I met with Attorney General Sessions, one of the things he was explicit about was he thought more people doing more drugs of any kind, and he included marijuana, did not make this country stronger.
And so,
and I don't disagree with him. I just think that the old system was, it was in many ways made things worse.
it sounds like your advice to marijuana dispensaries and users in Colorado is don't worry about this. You won't be put in prison. Is that advice that they can take to heart?
I'm not sure I would say that advice, because when the Attorney General of the United States directs the Department of Justice to make a decision like this, I wouldn't get overconfident.
So what is your advice to them? Well, you say it's more bark than bite.
My advice would be to make sure you comply with every regulation that we have. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed.
That the state has.
And really focus on doing this national experiment, increasingly a national experiment, the right way.
If your prediction that this will be more bark than bite turns out to be wrong and there is a serious crackdown, is there anything that your state can do to push back?
There are some things we can do to push back, but in the end, federal law, their powers extend beyond the state's powers. But they'd have, again, to go against the vote, the will of 2/3 of the American people, I don't see how that's beneficial to the Trump administration or to the Attorney General. I think what the Attorney General was saying is that he thinks this is a really bad idea and that he wishes he could do something about it. And I don't think he's got the resources, and it's not a high enough priority that he's really going to go out and try and tip over the apple cart. But he's expressing his strong feeling that this does not make America a stronger place.
Rather than push back on the Attorney General's enforcement priorities, he is enforcing the law as written. Would you be better off pushing to change the law?
Yeah, I think we are at that point. I think Congress should step back and say, all right, let's put some national guardrails on this and make sure that on a national level, we're coordinating our efforts to make sure we're eliminating the black market and protecting teenagers and, making sure that edibles are in tamper-proof, non-accessible for kids containers.
John Hickenlooper is the governor of Colorado, and he's a Democrat. Thank you for joining us today.
You bet. My pleasure.
That was from NPR in Colorado. And again, Governor Hickenlooper. Also in Colorado here is Senator Gardner, who is going to hold up DOJ nominations because of this. And he was not on board with this cannabis, from what I understand, originally.
Colorado Senator Cory Gardner will meet with Attorney General Jeff Sessions today to talk about marijuana.
More specifically, they will discuss Sessions' announcement about the feds stepping into the marijuana issue in states and Senator Gardner's reaction. 9 News reporter Eddie Randall is standing by with more. And Eddie, the two have been at odds since Sessions' announcement last week.
Good morning, Corey and Gary. So Senator Gardner is not feeling this new policy at all. Last week, Sessions said state prosecutors should go along with the feds when it comes to how people are prosecuted for marijuana use. Gardner says that's the opposite of what the Trump administration has said in the past. Senator Gardner is not letting this issue go without a fight. He put a hold on nominations for jobs at the Justice Department. Earlier this week, the White House set 4 picks for Assistant Attorney General jobs and a nominee for U.S. Marshal in Alabama, which is the home to Jeff Sessions. Last week, the Attorney General ended a federal policy that gave states guidelines to move forward with legalized marijuana. President Obama put that policy in place during his time in office. Under the new policy, federal prosecutors would be able to decide how tough to be on marijuana laws, taking the power away from states like Colorado as well as other states that have already legalized pot. Gardner says he was misled by Sessions on this issue before being confirmed as the Attorney General. The Department of Justice has not commented on the upcoming meeting between Sessions and Gardner, but some congressional aides say if Gardner continues his mission to block or stall the Department of Justice nominees, then several people would be affected, including some of those high positions at the Department of Justice. Now, we have to remember this. Gardner is a senator who has never or always been vocal about opposing legal marijuana. But he says no matter what side you take, it should be up to the states on how the laws are carried out. Today's meeting is set to be behind closed doors, but we'll be waiting to hear what comes out of that meeting.
And we heard what came out of that meeting, and that was absolutely no change and no real understanding by Sessions. That was the word that came out after that meeting that day. Here is how a 12-year-old cannabis activist in Delaware, who was a patient, 12 years old, Riley Maidler, this is her message, and this message goes to everyone, but including Jeff Sessions.
Hi, my name is Riley Maidler, and in 2013 I had bone tumors when I was at the age of 7. My parents, they didn't know what to do, so they looked up what they should do online, and they found out about cannabis. At first, they weren't sure if they should give me cannabis because I'm in a religious family, and there are also 2 police officers in my family. I've been stable from my tumor for 4 years, and as long as I'm on cannabis, I'm seizure-free. A year after starting cannabis oil, I came out in the public as to what we were doing to get me better because I wanted to help other sick children so they could be able to take my medicine too so they can live a happy and better life. I had a lot of people support me, but I also had legislators who didn't. I did not get mad at them or blame them, they just didn't understand cannabis. I needed to talk to them about how it changed my life. I spoke to each legislator who had questions and answered any questions they had for me. I appreciated their questions. They had good questions for me about how cannabis oil made me feel and how my grades in school were. I was happy to show them my report cards were straight A's. They passed Riley's law in our state to make it medically legal for children. Mr. Sessions, I know that you just have not had someone you love as much as my parents love me be in a position where cannabis oil was the only treatment available. I know that you have not had a near-death experience where cannabis oil saved your life. I know that you have not faced death the way I have. I pray that you or your grandchildren never do. It is a nightmare and you feel like you're praying alone when it happens, even though everyone says they're praying for you. My parents still cry when they talk about my diagnosis, even though I'm better today. It changes your life forever. I've decided to stick with love. I don't have it in me to hate you for putting my life in jeopardy, but I can tell you that I'm really scared. I'm scared for myself that my medicine will be taken away from me, and I'm extremely scared that it'll be taken away from a child who is worse off than I am and they'll die. I'm begging you, please don't let any kids die because of you not understanding the science behind cannabis and how it can heal our sick bodies. Please don't let them die because of political or financial gain. When you're facing the end of your days, these things will not matter, but those families you help save will. Mr. Sessions, even though you took away the Cole Memo's protection, you really have the power to turn this into a hero situation.
He really has the power to turn this into a hero situation. This is a 12-year-old girl suffering in Delaware, Riley Maidler. How incredible was that piece? Play it for your friends, folks. People who don't understand this as a medicine need to hear a 12-year-old who's been on cannabis oil, who certainly hasn't lost any brain cells. That's for sure. Here's some reaction from an ex-DEA agent who has turned pot venture capitalist. He's in it for the money now, I guess. But let's hear what he has to say. I'm sort of against people that have been arresting us for years, making money in this industry. But here is this guy.
It appears to be something that's motivated by personal animus on the part of the Attorney General. And interestingly, we've seen, or appears to be at odds with previous statements that the president made while on the campaign trail. And it's clearly out of touch with what the American people want. Support for legalized cannabis is at an all-time high. Over 9 out of 10 Americans support access to medical cannabis. I mean, that kind of support for any issue is virtually unheard of. But at the end of the day, we think that federal prosecutors in the 90-some-odd districts across the U.S. are essentially going to be continue to be guided by the tenets of the Cole Memo. because frankly, it's just good policy. And whether it's formally in place or not, we feel like that's going to be the guiding light for enforcement decisions. And so at the end of the day, we don't think much is going to change, especially when you look at the existing markets. I mean, the fact is regulated cannabis works. We're taking money away from criminal enterprises. We're freeing up law enforcement resources. We're generating tax revenue, and we're creating jobs. And so it just is good policy.
But one of the biggest challenges has been the banking industry and getting banks and also insurance companies on board to be able to sort of cater to this growing marijuana industry. I would imagine this is going to have a very chilling effect on the financial sector as it relates to this industry.
I do think we might see a short-term chilling effect on investment and banking, but keep in mind a couple things. The FinCEN guidance that was issued in conjunction with some of the justice guidance, which comes from Treasury, is still in effect, nor have we seen any directive or mandate from Justice to begin some kind of crackdown. And so while there may be a little bit of skittishness initially, this is a huge growth sector, and I think the financial services industry is slowly coming to terms with that and understanding the compliance needs of serving this industry, and we're seeing steady and continued growth in terms of access to capital.
So again, that was an ex-DEA agent who is now a venture capitalist in the cannabis industry. Rand Paul, who formerly, a few times, has run for president. Rand Paul says that the problem isn't marijuana. The problem is prescription opiates. And I think he's right.
Tell us where you are on this new decision.
Well, the first thing I would say is just because I believe in freedom doesn't mean I'm in favor of drugs. And I agree with you, drugs are a scourge. I would say with the heroin and the opioid problem, really most of it's actually come in the beginning from prescription drugs. People who were prescribed opioids and then went to heroin. 4 out of 5 people on heroin started out with prescription opioids. With regard to the federal government coming in and controverting state law, on marijuana, it's going to be quite difficult because some of these states not only have been doing medical marijuana for a decade or more, now some of them are doing recreational. It'll be virtually impossible. I think it's a mistake for the Department of Justice to do this, but it'll be virtually impossible. They would have to send an army and federal troops in there. There's no way it's going to change.
So you think state law should preempt federal drug laws?
I think what you should do is, since the states have decided to legalize this, we should get rid of any federal encumbrances that make it difficult to have a legal business. For example, right now,
what if they do it to child pornography? What if they do it with child pornography and states decide, well, it's okay to have an age of consent lowered?
Right. The IRS currently says that if you run a medical marijuana industry in Colorado, you cannot deduct the wages of your workers. So what happens is many of these entities either don't file federal taxes or have been disputing their federal taxes for a decade, and the federal government hasn't gotten anything from these. The state government taxes them at the sale point of marijuana, and so they've actually, in Colorado and different states, collected millions and millions of dollars. And people are looking at the crime statistics, but actually most of the studies that I've seen have not seen an increase in crime, have actually seen crime continuing its downward trend. So I don't know. There are arguments back and forth for it. I think in all practical purposes, no matter what the Department of Justice decides to do, it's practically impossible for them to come in and try to overturn Colorado or California or Nevada or Washington or Oregon law.
Well, the cost, and you're a medical professional, but the medical costs of legalization and the increase in pot usage by those from the ages of 12 to 17, the American Academy of Pediatrics, which they don't really take a position on legalization. They just did the
This
studies.
This is Laura
of it.
Ingram, by the way.
It's skyrocketing,
which is wrong and
that's
fake.
what paving the way for legalization does. So, It changes the young brain.
Well, I think the bigger problem, the bigger problem, Laura, I would say, is not marijuana; it's prescription opioids. And if you look at the problem of heroin and the addiction to prescription opioids, this is devastating our country. More people are dying from car accidents, are dying from opioids than car accidents.
Well, it's freedom
and
now.
There really has been a
if people want to take it, why can't they take it? You're a libertarian. Take opioids. So
well,
what? If marijuana is legal, why not opioids?
No. Well, the thing is it's legal for doctors to prescribe a whole host of things, but it's not advisable to sometimes prescribe let's say your kid gets his wisdom teeth out, so we give them 100 OxyContin. So people have been over-prescribing these things, and then also the drug company, there's Purdue Pharma came in the 1990s and said, oh, it's not addictive. And so they sold this, and they actually ended up paying a fine, a $630 million fine. There's a great book on this called Dreamland, and in it they talk about how a lot of people got hooked because of doctors doing the wrong thing. So it's not really a freedom issue. It's actually a medical issue on whether it's advisable to prescribe OxyContin and highly addictive drugs for long-term pain control.
Yeah, well, China's dumping in fentanyl like it's gone out of style, and you take fentanyl once and you're hooked. And so this is I know it's not the cool position. I'm not worried about being the cool cat, but I think this is going to go down as one of the worst decisions for our country and our overall well-being. Forget what it means for money or people making money. Billionaires are investing in pot fields, and I just think as it affects our country, our well-being, our children, brain development, all of it, it will go down as a disastrous decision. I'm not for locking people up. I'm not saying people lock people up for recreational use, but I am saying that the tacit approval of pot use and the glamorization of pot use is going to ensure that we have more addicts and more people in serious mental health decline. That's my concern, Senator. I'll let you close it out.
I think, though, if you looked at the problem, you'd probably, if we looked at it and tried to weigh which is a bigger problem, that or the opioid problem, I think it's really the prescription opioid problem that is. But they're different problems, and they aren't necessarily the same problem. And the opioid problem has a direct linkage to the heroin problem. And the addiction to opioids is well proven and well accepted, and marijuana being addictive isn't really so much accepted.
Laura Ingraham needs to learn what the reality is with cannabis. And as we know, I'm preaching to the choir here with my listeners, is that the opioid problem can be eliminated by using cannabis, and she's just scientifically wrong. 25% of less opioid abuse in states that have legalized cannabis. So that's the Laura Ingraham Show, and she's never been a fan of ours. Now let's move over to the lighter side of things a little bit, okay? In regard to the reaction from people with the Jeff Sessions memo from last week. Here is the Stephen Colbert.
Folks, we've got some bad news for people who partake of the sweet, sweet green stuff. Of course, I'm talking about the money states are making off legal marijuana. Because today, their buzz was shackled by Attorney General and gnome on your blacklight poster who's going to narc on you, Jeff Sessions. Today, Sessions rescinded an Obama-era policy that paved the way for legalized marijuana to flourish. My roommate in college made it flourish with a lamp in the closet. But come on, Jeff, you're the state's rights guy. Would it help you if they smoked the weed out of a rolled-up Confederate flag? This new directive from Sessions can mean only one thing. He still doesn't know that white people smoke pot, too. We can't expose our delicate young ladies to the jazz man's reefer stick. I said, good day, sir. Beauregard, bring the horses around. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Yeah. Now, states who have legalized pot are surprisingly mellow about this news. In fact, the U.S. Attorney in Colorado says there will be no change to marijuana enforcement despite Sessions' shift on pot policy. Wait a second. Pot just got recriminalized and smokers are less paranoid? What's next? They've had enough Little Debbie Swiss cakes. But the Republicans' opponents aren't taking this sitting down in the couch on the basement. Like independent senator and man watching a dog play electric guitar, Bernie Sanders. Sanders was critical of treating pot smokers as criminals, saying marijuana isn't heroin. It's true. Marijuana is not heroin. And for the record, Senator Sanders, a spoon is not a comb. But, come on.
Not a cone.
Come on, Sessions knows marijuana isn't heroin because he's on record saying marijuana is only slightly less awful than heroin. It's true. They're very close. You take heroin, you die. Smoke marijuana, you will die laughing at Jeff Sessions. But who knows? Who knows if this will even last, because a 12-year-old Colorado girl who takes medical marijuana for seizures is already suing Jeff Sessions and the DEA. And Mr. Sessions, Mr. Sessions, you do not want to mess with a 12-year-old girl. She's probably twice your height. And she's on the demon weed, watch out! We'll be right back with noted pot opponent, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson. Wow, what a cliffhanger.
Sorry about that. Went a little bit too far with that clip. Anyway, that was Colbert, and 12-year-olds are speaking out quite well, as we just heard a few moments ago. Jimmy Kimmel, he also has a theory about why Jeff Sessions hates marijuana.
Here's another coincidence I find interesting. It's Girl Scout cookie season right now. Every year, 3 days after we resolve to lose weight, Girl Scout cookie season comes. So stay with me on this. The Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, today announced that he has rescinded something called the Cole Memo. This was a policy from the Obama administration that discouraged federal prosecutors from pursuing charges against the sale of marijuana in states where the sale of marijuana is legal. If the states make it legal, the FBI leaves them alone. Jeff Sessions is getting rid of that now. So the feds will be prosecuting in states where marijuana is legal again. And no one can figure out why he's doing this. And with all that's going on, it's just like locking someone up for retransmitting baseball games without the consent of Major League Baseball. It's very minor, but something about it seemed fishy to me. And I want to connect the dots for you so I can tell you what's really going on here, okay? Here, follow me over here. All right. Now, up on the wall, fact, Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, wants to jail marijuana users. What do people get when they smoke marijuana? The munchies. And what is the best snack when you have the munchies? Cookies. Now, who makes the best cookies? The Girl Scouts. And when does Girl Scout cookie season start? January, which, based on my research, is the same month we're in right now. So Jeff Sessions wants to stop people from smoking pot in January, which will result in fewer people eating Thin Mints, tag-alongs, Do-si-dos, these shortbread cookies everyone hates, which hurts the Girl Scouts. And who profits from hurting the Girl Scouts? Big Cookie profits. Big Cookie, which is made up of companies like Keebler. And why would Jeff Sessions want to hurt the Girl Scouts and help Keebler? Because Jeff Sessions is a dirty little Keebler elf. That's why. And Jeff, if you're listening with those pointy little ears from that hollowed-out tree you live in, know this, we are on to you, and we will smoke you out of that tree if we have to.
Let's smoke him out of that tree. Anyway, that was the lighter side of things with Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert. Now, staying on the light side, one more quick little story coming out of Colorado Springs, Colorado. 420-friendly sex event at a Colorado Springs cannabis club. And some people don't like that, but this is what's going on. Sex and cannabis. God, think of that.
And a Colorado Springs vape lounge stirring up a lot of controversy tonight after advertising an upcoming 420 friendly sex event. That's where we begin tonight.
The owner says they're simply filling a need in the community, but people have taken to Facebook questioning whether this is even legal.
News 5's Laura Wilson in studio tonight with a story you'll only see on News 5. Laura.
Yeah, and the owner tells me there's been a need for this type of party for years, and also said he didn't need any special permit or license to host it. One of the only cannabis consumption clubs in the state is about to host the first of its kind event in Colorado Springs.
It's clothing optional, it's 420 friendly, and you know, people are coming and they know what they're coming for.
The Speakeasy Vape Lounge has put out several ads to what they call a play party. But Dab Lounge owner Daniel Goodman calls it a black eye to the cannabis community.
I can't believe the city council would shut all the other clubs down and let this guy stay going. You know, those people have no idea that the bong that they're about to hit could have been God knows where the night before.
Speakeasy owner Jamin Johnson says cleanliness and safety are a top priority for the event.
Condoms and lubricant and different things like that.
And a list of rules you must follow before joining the party.
Ask before touching. No means no. Only ask once. It's not like it's gonna, you know, just be naked people walking up and down the street. You know, they have to come in, they have to be 21.
Which offered some peace of mind to staff at the neighboring auto truck group until we showed them the Facebook ad.
Oh yeah, that's not gonna go well. I would imagine that would bring in a certain amount of clientele that we're not overly interested in having in this area.
The ad telling people to, quote, bring your smoke and bring the lube because you're going to need both for this party. What you don't need for this party, according to Johnson, is permission from the city.
There is no licensing requirements for this. What the city and the state would require is that it be a private event held in a private center such as we are.
Regardless of its controversial response, organizers maintain they're simply responding to a demand here in the community.
There is a need for this, and there is, you know, a place that is allowed us to provide it, so we're going to do that.
And we did reach out to the city. They referred all questions to CSPD, who say they're aware of this and looking into it, but did not offer any comments to us. And because this is a cannabis club, the health department, simply put, has no say in this. Rob, Elizabeth, back to you.
All right, Laura, thanks.
So that's Colorado Springs. Just if you go up there, just be careful that you don't lose your cherry on the end of your joint. We'll be right back after this. You could get burned.
It's all about the 420 MMJRadio. The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio.
Hi, this is Grace from Organica. You're listening to Medical Marijuana Radio.
And we're back. And online today, I'm really happy to have Cannabis Cheri Sicard on, who has a great book out right now, available. And it's coming out, I guess, in print version next week. But right now, it's available electronically on Kindle. It's called The Easy Cannabis Cookbook, with more than 60 medical marijuana recipes for sweet and savory edibles. Welcome, Cheri, to Medical Marijuana Radio.
Thanks for having me.
So what was your impetus to put out a cookbook?
This is actually my second cookbook and third marijuana book. I was a food writer before cannabis came into my life, so with cooking with cannabis was kind of a natural evolution, and the publisher, Callisto Media, came to me for this book because they wanted something that was easy and accessible for home cooks. And I'm kind of known for that. I also have an online cooking course. It's a comprehensive 2-hour course for home cooks that teaches them how to cook. And I'm all about putting the power of edibles into the consumer's hands because, you know, right now we have all these misguided legislators putting ridiculous dosage limits and telling you what you can and can't make edibles out of. And so for people to get what they really need, it's going to come down to having to make it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously it's a lot more economical that way as well. I mean, you could, if you don't make your own oil, you certainly could, go buy a gram of oil and make sure it's decarbed and put it into some butter and do something with it, or oil or whatever. So, in your cookbook, are you also teaching a process of how to infuse, make oil from cannabis?
Yes, we have a whole infusion chapter with lots of different infusions. Of course, we do butter and oil, but I also go into how to infuse cream and milk, honey, syrups, sugars. So we have lots of different infusions beyond just butter and oil, even though those are the most popular.
So, obviously, decarboxylation is really important. I mean, if you don't decarboxylize your buds or trim, or so to speak, you're not going to get the effect needed. So, what is your method for decarboxylizing?
Yeah, we cover this in the book, and some people get really elaborate with it, and it's a scary sounding word, but it's really very simple. All you're doing is heating up your cannabis, so you activate the THCA or THC acid and convert that into THC. So if you don't decarb, you're not going to get very much of a buzz. You won't get very high, although you'll still have lots of medicinal effects. But I do recommend decarbing because most people do want a buzz, and all we do is put the crumbled cannabis into an oven-proof dish, cover it, and we just heat it for about 20 minutes at 225. And then you're ready to cook with it. Very simple.
Absolutely. Now, of course, you have to be careful about what temperatures that you're cooking at, because if you cook, for instance, when I've made some cookies or brownies in the past, if it calls for 350 or 375 for X amount of time, you can't really do that because you're burning off some terpenes and THC and CBD, right?
No, that's not true.
No? Okay, please.
Yes, you can cook. Okay. Yeah, people get confused because, yes, THC is rendered useless by, I think it's 392, and it breaks down way before that. However, you can cook at those oven temperatures because even though the oven is that hot, the food itself is not. I mean, if you think about roasting a turkey or a chicken, it can be in there for hours, but when it's cooked, it's only at 165 degrees or so. So what you need to make sure is that your food itself is not getting overly hot, but the oven temperature can be higher. You can bake cakes and cookies normally.
That's a great point. That honestly, I never thought of it that way. So thank you for enlightening me on that. Do you use these temperature guns? That you like shoot a little red beam into the food and see how hot it is.
If I'm cooking meat or something like that, sure, but most things, no. I mean, I know the food is not going to get to that degree of the oven temperature because it's not in there long enough to do that.
Uh-huh.
So, when it comes to temperature and cooking, what you want to avoid, though, is like putting your butter or oil like directly into the pan over hot heat. You don't want to saute in it. You want to use these as the fats that go into the food rather than on them or around them, if that makes sense. You're also not going to want to use your oil for a marinade because most of that's going to end up in the trash rather than in your food. And it's an expensive ingredient, So try to find ways to put your butter, your oil, your infusion into the food that you're making rather than cooking with it. That makes sense because that's where you're going to run into danger of it getting too hot.
Absolutely, yeah, that makes sense to me as well. Now, in going through your book last night, the Easy Cannabis Cookbook, I found something very interesting. I have my own opinion. I think I agree with you. To grind or not to grind? That is the question about your buds.
Yes, it's one of my pet peeves. Yes, almost every cookbook will tell you to finely grind your weed to a powder, put it in a food processor, put it in a coffee grinder, and I say don't do this. The reason why is what you're extracting is on the leaves, not in them. So when you grind it to a fine powder, what that does is it puts a lot of green plant material into your food, which gives it more of that yucky taste that most of us don't like. And you're really not improving it. I think you improve the quality of your edibles. I like to just grind it. Not even grind it. I'll just crumble it up like I'm going to roll a joint with my hands. And that's about as much grinding as I like to do before extracting. And I just find it gives... You still have a strong infusion, but you have a better flavor in the finished product, in my opinion.
So I agree. And obviously, you're getting more plant matter. It's going to be greener. It's like, I've seen that. I've seen people make butter that is so dark green that it's really not flavorful. It overwhelms what you're cooking. So
exactly.
So how about this, okay? And we're going to touch on some other things as well. But dosing is really, really important. You really got to get a calculator out. I know that you have a website that helps people with their dosing and so forth. But there's also something, edible overload, when you eat an edible that maybe is too strong for you. And what do you recommend for that?
Well, I have an article on my website about what to do if you eat too much marijuana, and that can happen. There's no easier way to get too much than by eating it, because everybody's needs are very different. I mean, people's dosing needs are drastically different. And while 10 milligrams is going to be too much THC for some people, 100 is not going to be enough for others. So that's why dosing is the trickiest part of cannabis cooking. It's like the topic I get the most questions about. So what can you do if you eat too much? First off, calm down. It's not dangerous. You're not going to die. There's no fatal overdoses of cannabis. Your organs aren't going to shut down, so calm down. It might feel uncomfortable for a while, but it's not dangerous that way. Try to sleep it off if you can. Some other things you can do is chew on black peppercorns. There's a terpene in there that interacts with the cannabis that can help mellow out that uncomfortable high. And the other thing that's really important is CBDs. If you have a CBD-only product, I like Bang's CBD breath spray, for instance. A few squirts of that, and you'll come down from that uncomfortable high, because CBDs are kind of like a rescue inhaler for too much THC.
Absolutely.
They really can counteract each other.
I agree. Keep some pure CBD around for that. Obviously, if you had like some CBD wax or shatter, you could take probably a good hit of that, and you're going to be much more comfortable. I've heard about the peppercorn thing before. Neil Young, a famous rock and roll writer, singer, songwriter, he's been talking about that for a long time. I actually tried that one time, and to be honest with you, I didn't chew on the peppercorns, but I inhaled the aroma from the peppercorn jar, which is what I had read about, and I actually got a really huge rush after that, and I don't know that I came down too much. Yeah, so I think the CBD thing is probably much better, and I know that there's some products out. A couple of years ago, I had a rescue product gentleman that developed one on my show, and we talked about that, and he had CBD and some other kind of vitamin things in there that really seem to really work. So it's something that I think these products are going to be necessary, because there's a lot of new people coming to cannabis this year and the last couple of years, and they need to start really low and slow. Have you ever...
Right. I mean, the first part of that is to determine how much you need. I mean, we all hear about these numbers and dosages, but those numbers don't mean much if you don't know how much you need, and as I said, people's needs are so different. So it's a good idea to tell people to sit down when they know they're not going to travel and get an edible that they know the dosage in. Start slow at like 10 milligrams, see how you feel. If you didn't feel that, then try it again the next day with more, and build up till you find your ideal range. Then once you know that, you can make your edibles to that. And then my dosing class teaches you how to do that. It's a free 10-minute class at canatomy.com, and it can teach you kind of how to estimate how much THC is in your edibles before you eat them, or how to adjust your recipe so you get the amount and the dosage that you need. And I hear a lot from people that get too much, but even more emails I get from people who are not feeling their edibles, because a lot of the recipes that are out there, for good reason, are dosed very low. But a lot of people need more than 10 milligrams, and so you need to play with it and adjust for your individual needs, and that's the beauty of making your own.
Absolutely, and then again, economically as well. I saw a couple really cool recipes in there that I want to point out to people. One was your hot cafe mocha. Looks like a really great way to ingest cannabis and THC and CBD. And your matzo ball soup, it looked really good. Tell me, in the matzo ball soup, what is everything medicated, or is it just the matzo balls, or just the broth? Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, in that soup, it's the matzo balls and medicated. So yeah, there's different ways to medicate different recipes, and depending on what you're cooking, you can kind of decide the best way. And since there is oil in the matzo balls, that was really easy to sub in some cannabis oil to medicate those. And there's lots of great flavors going on. So yeah, that's one of my favorite recipes.
Well,
especially in the winter.
The pictures just look fabulous, and I am of the Jewish religion, so I know matzo ball soup. Are you using any seltzer in there to make it light as well?
Yeah, I like to myself. Yeah, when I make it, I use seltzer. Yeah.
Let's talk about, if you can, about eating raw cannabis. Do you have recipes for using that in salads and so forth? And Obviously, this is raw cannabis is not decarboxylized, and so
No.
there's not a real psychoactive feeling to that. But do you know by any chance for people that have what do you kidney stones? Is raw cannabis high in oxalates? Do you know, like some other greens are?
I really don't know. This is a kind of a cutting edge thing, the new alternative dietary cannabis. This research is starting to be done in it. I don't have any recipes. I talk about it a little in the book. There are certain people who shouldn't use it, so I can't really speak to that. I'm not a doctor, but if you don't have these conditions, raw cannabis is probably one of the most antioxidant-rich plants on the planet. So it's super mega nutrition that you get that way that can fight a lot of diseases and such. But it's a new practice that's just kind of coming into vogue. Adding it to salads, making smoothies, juices, things like that.
Yes. Your book again is called The Easy Cannabis Cookbook with the 60 recipes and all kinds of other information in there. Where can people get that right now?
They can get it on Amazon.com along with my other books, which is the Cannabis Gourmet Cookbook, and also I'm the author of Mary Jane, the Complete Marijuana Handbook for Women, which is a great overall resource for women who might be curious about cannabis, who want to get into it, want to know more. I have tons of men buying this book with their mothers, their girlfriends, their wives that, are cannabis curious but aren't sure about it. It's a great, easy to read, non-threatening introduction.
Well, your book looks fantastic. Your website, which is Cannabis Cheri, that's CHERI, is that .com? CannabisCheri.com,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and on there, is this for anybody or for people that subscribe to you? You have a dosing calculator that people can use, right?
Yeah. The dosing calculator you can find at Cannademy.com. That's CANNADEMY, Cannademy.com. And that's part of the free dosing class, or it's part of my 2-hour comprehensive online cooking course.
Okay, so you have an online cooking course, meaning what? People can subscribe and watch videos that are instructing what to do?
Right. It's a one-time fee, and they get lifetime access. You can watch the classes as often as you want, as many times as you want, on your schedule. Anytime we upgrade it, and we do upgrade it reasonably frequently, the upgrades are included if you're enrolled in the course. And it covers pretty much everything a home consumer would need to know to be a successful cannabis cook at home.
So,
and you also get me as a personal coach. So if there's questions or problems or troubleshooting, I'm always there to help the students through that.
That's really great. So now that California, which you are originally from, I believe, or you've lived there for a long time, now a resident. So now that they've gone rec, 13 days ago, I'm sure you've been involved with, advocating and fighting for this for years. I mean, I started handing out normal leaflets in Los Angeles in 1970 something when Governor Brown was a governor back then, trying to decriminalize, and he did actually. But so it's been a long time, and so what do you think is probably, if you have an opinion on this, what's just egregiously wrong about the new rules that needs to be fixed really quickly?
Oh, Larry, we don't have enough time.
I'll give you all the time you want, but just let me. What do you think is the worst thing that is not going to work to make this business easy?
So many problems with the law. In my opinion, it's really a bad law. I almost didn't vote for it. The only reason I didn't, it did help keep some people out of jail, but it is over-regulation to the max. In my opinion, it's not legalization. It's just a regulation. It seems to be really kind of keeping a lot of small players out of the business, so it's an uneven business playing field. We have a state law that still needs the approval of cities and counties who are ignorant and trying to ban. So even though we technically have legalized marijuana, much of the state can't get access. There's ridiculous rules on edible dosages and what you can make them out of. Things are overtaxed. I mean, very little good about this law other than the PR talking point that California legalized marijuana, and that is a good thing and has worldwide repercussions. But in practical means, it's a terrible, terrible law.
Well, it's gonna take some time to just evolve the laws and the rules. I mean, look, 1937. Look how long it took us to get out of that prohibition, and of course, there's still prohibition all over the world, and
we're not out
our
of
other
it by a
states.
long shot.
Yeah. So it's like, I've waited a long time for this. I really didn't know that I would see legalization in my lifetime. I'm 67 years old. I'll be 68 this year. It's my 50th year of using the plant, and it really was one of the things I wanted to see in my lifetime. And until everybody can use this plant legally, I'm really not going to be happy. But it will take time for different states to evolve and change the rules. It's certainly a start, but I think some of the new states that are coming on need to look at states that have been around for a long time. I mean, look, there would be no recreational marijuana in any state if it wasn't for California in 1996 and the gay community and the Northern California, San Francisco, Oakland. I mean, it really is what made this thing happen. So I understand your frustration in regard to all of that. So anything else you'd like to talk about today?
We've covered a lot of topics today.
Yeah, we did. How do you?
No, the legalization definitely is moving the ball forward, even though there are a lot of problems with it. So that's a good thing, especially with this administration trying to fight it tooth and nail. So it is important for all activists to be diligent and not let it go backwards.
Absolutely.
We have made a lot of progress, even though it's not perfect.
One of my pet peeves is that with legalization, we need to preserve the medical industry. They're two different industries. They can coexist, but they're different. There's different needs. Obviously, medical patients need to have higher doses of edibles, and they're limiting that in the recreational market, and it's becoming a big problem. So I think that your book and your books...
Well, they're limiting it in the medical market too. The rules now are across the board. I know in California, and I believe also Colorado, Washington, Oregon. So this is happening all over.
Well,
and yeah, the patients are the ones getting hurt as a result of that.
And
they're also getting taxed ridiculously. What other medicine is taxed like this? I mean, this is just wrong. So I agree completely. Medical should be separate and treated differently.
There should be no tax. There's no tax when you walk into Walgreens and get your opioids. So there should be no tax on medical cannabis at all as well. But it's all going to change. But people have been out there championing this plant and advocating for it for a long time, and it's coming to fruition now. We just have banking is a problem. All that's going to need to be fixed, and it's.
I mean, our politicians have to stop treating this as if it's plutonium. This is a benevolent plant. My friend Lanny Swerdlow, who's a registered nurse, used to say if it was found that tomatoes did half of what cannabis did, they'd be shoving tomatoes down our throat 24/7. But because it's cannabis, we have to jump through these hoops, and it's treated like it's plutonium. It's really ridiculous.
Well, it's the old stigma that is still out there, and people like you and me and all the big activists and advocates over the years, we have to thank them for trying to change the stigma that has been put on this. So again, everybody, it's the Easy Cannabis Cookbook. Check it out on Amazon. You can get it electronically on your Kindle. You can also, the printed version will be out, I'm thinking about a week or a week and a half. Go to, go ahead.
Yeah, it's released on January 23rd.
January 23rd, so that's a Tuesday in a couple of weeks. So again, so that's CannabisCheri.com. It's Amazon for the Easy Cannabis Cookbook and Cheri's other books. Cheri, Cannabis Cheri Sicard, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk about it. Again, the pictures are beautiful. The recipes look great, and I advise people to check it out. So we'll be right back after this, and thank you so much for sharing your work today.
Cherry pie. cherry pie. Whoa, so good. Give me some. Give me some. Give me some. Cherry pie. Oh, now little Jack Horner sat in a corner eating his cherry pie. Oh, now he's stuck in his thumb. Pulled out a plum. Said, whoa, what a good boy am I. Yeah, give me some. Yeah, give me some. Whoa, give me some cherry pie. Oh, now little Jack Horner sat in his corner eating his cherry pie. Oh, now he's stuck in his thumb. Pulled out a plum. Said, whoa, what a good boy am I. Yeah, now get me some. Whoa, give me some. Yeah, give me some cherry pie. Whoa, yeah, cherry pie. Whoa, yeah. The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show. The medical marijuana.
Well, I want to thank Cheri Sicard, Cannabis Cheri Sicard. Check her out at CannabisCheri.com. Also, check out her books on Amazon. She has several of them. Also, like to thank my two radio mentors, both with the initials HS. Thank you for your inspiration. If you'd like to be a guest, if you've written a book, if you have a product, a website, you're an advocate, an activist, write us at info@MMJRadio.com. Again, info@MMJRadio.com. We just started our 9th season last week, and this is our show number 2. If you'd like to hear some of our older shows, you can go to medicalmarijuanaradio.com, or you can go to MMJRadio.com. Also, YouTube.com. Username is LSLove88. On SoundCloud, we're MMJ Radio, as well as Spreaker. We're also on CannabisTube.net. Also on Spreaker and iHeartRadio, you can hear us on the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting System and on NowTV.com, channel 937. And the CannaChannel.com coming soon.
Shalom.
Oh yeah, and fuck you know who,
Bapu buye da, suye da bo, bapu deni, da ba bo ba bo ba bo bo bo